Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's The World This Week. The World This Week in partnership with the Daily Beast Paris correspondent Aaron Zaleski, who's been taking time off from the hard news to look at an exhibit this week on
Oscar Wilde.
Oscar Wilde, which is at one of the Paris museums. Oscar Wilde, who lived and died in the French capital.
He did.
All right. Also with us, Anne Penkett, reporter and should we say novelist as well.
You may.
Your new book, Murder on the Marsh, which is set where?
In North Norfolk.
North Norfolk, okay.
Also in France.
Christopher Ruddy is here in Europe. He's usually in Washington, D.C. He is...
New York.
And New York.
And Florida.
And Florida, okay. He is a man on the move, and he is the head of conservative news site Newsmax. Many thanks for being with us. We welcome for this part of our conversation our Brussels correspondent, Maeve McMahon. Maeve, thank you for joining us on the day of a European summit, and there's a lot happening. That's why we roped you in for this part of our show. When we were talking about Barack Obama just before the break, he's told this week Donald Trump to stop whining when he did so in the company of Italy's Prime Minister, Matteo Renzi, the guest of honor at Obama's last state dinner as president. The Prime Minister of Italy wined and dined in the company of notable Italian Americans that include everyone from the New York State Governor, Andrew Cuomo, to, yes, singer Gwen Stefani. For Obama, who still believes in a multilateral world, who actively campaigned against Brexit, it's a chance to back a man, the Washington Post this week called the Italian Justin Trudeau, a reference to the progressive, fresh-faced Prime Minister of Canada. Renzi has budget issues with Brussels and a referendum of his own coming up December 4th to streamline Italy's institutions like the Senate.
I want to thank the United States of America for their extraordinary support in the battle that Italy is facing to affirm a paradigm of growth within Europe.
All right, Renzi, who and Anne Penkett, I'll put it to you before we go to Maeve in Brussels. The Reuters news agency this week quoting Jean-Claude Juncker in an internal meeting as telling the others, if we give up on Renzi, we give up on Europe. We seem to be having this sort of same pattern, like with the build-up to Brexit, this rousing endorsement from Obama at the White House.
Absolutely. And of course, any rousing endorsement from Obama is like the kiss of death. That's what happened to Cameron after he was so delighted to get Obama's endorsement. And poor old Renzi, who, like Cameron, has fallen into the trap of calling a referendum he thought he would win, and then all these extraneous issues come along, and ultimately people are not going to be voting about reforming the Senate, but it'll be a vote in him. And it looks like Juncker's prophecy may come true, doesn't it?
Yeah, just ahead of that state dinner, Maeve, we had somebody from inside of Renzi's own camp, Mario Monti, the former prime minister, who said he was going to vote against the referendum. It's been a tough week for Renzi, and it finishes in Brussels with some chastising over his decision to press on with a budget that doesn't follow EU rules.
Absolutely, that week started well for him in the sense that he got to enjoy some Gwen Stefani music in the White House, and the red carpet was indeed rolled out with the American's top chef as well serving dinner to himself and his wife, because quite frankly, Barack Obama and the United States are all looking at Europe and looking at the situation, the fact that on the 23rd of June, the United Kingdom decided to have a referendum to leave the European Union. They're looking at all this, as well as the fact that on the 4th of December now, Matteo Renzi will hold his constitutional referendum. Barack Obama concerned because the word on the street here in Brussels is that it's likely to be a no in that referendum. And where will that leave Matteo Renzi's political career? He said that he might resign if there's a no, even though he's kind of retracting that. He was the main man, actually. He was one of the protagonists, if you like, last night at the EU Summit on the discussion about Russia. He was very keen to put a reflective debate about Russia-EU relations on the table last night. He's been pushing Donald Tusk, the EU Council President, for months to discuss the broader relations. Of course, Italy was hit hard by the sanctions that Vladimir Putin, the Russian president, imposed on the European Union in retaliation for the tough economic sanctions that the European Union, as 28 back in 2014, imposed on Russia for what they called was their illegal annexation of Crimea and their role in eastern Ukraine. And that's why actually Matteo Renzi was the man last night to push back on having the idea of sanctions actually put in those final statements. We didn't even get around to the budget, but that's of course another topic that he's in tight negotiations with as well, with his friends or counterparts here in Brussels.
All right, so Renzi, somebody with more influence sometimes, it seems, in Brussels than back home these days. Of course, we'll see when that referendum happens on December the 4th. He may get off lightly when it comes to the budget, but not Theresa May. She was made to wait until 1 a.m. to make her big Brexit speech at the European leaders' dinner Thursday night in Brussels. Her first EU summit, perhaps a foretaste of the hard bargaining to come over Brexit. Maeve McMahon, right now, is it posturing or are we set for an ugly showdown?
Yeah, I think we can forget about talking about soft Brexit or hard Brexit. I think we're going to see a very messy Brexit. It's going to be each man for himself. We could feel in the room last night, although she came very poised, very polite and charming, saying that, you know, she wanted to make sure there was a strong UK that would be in a strong European Union, have a good partnership. But she was clear that Brexit would not be irreversible, that there would be no second referendum, and that she would be sitting on the other side of the table. There was a bit of a strange mood in the room, and people not really willing to give her all that glory that she might have thought she would have been getting, with many people saying that if they have decided to leave the bloc, they should not be discussing the future. Because in fact, she interrupted discussions on migration last night to scold, if you like, the other 27 for holding meetings without the United Kingdom, like the Bratislava summit last month and another one they've scheduled for early next year in Malta. But Donald Tusk, of course, said that the 27 need to be able to sit down together to pave out the next steps for their future as 27, tackling multiple challenges without their strong UK sitting on the same side
Let's
as
put
them.
Let's put that to the rest of the panel here. Aaron Zaleski, should we, since they haven't invoked Article 50 yet, right? Should Britain have been at the table in Bratislava? Should Britain be at the table for every discussion?
That's a good question because, yes, technically, if they haven't invoked Article 50 yet, they technically could go. But on the other hand, I think it's more of a message that they're trying to send to the UK. Okay, you want it out, so you're out. You're not included in these talks anymore. You're a separate entity now.
Is this getting a lot of coverage in the United States?
It is, and a lot of people are actually comparing Trump's success to the Brexit vote, which came as a bit of a surprise. But I do think there's a delicious irony we're seeing tonight, François. We have the elites in Europe that are complaining that Trump is talking about a rigged election and won't respect the democratic vote. But how many elites here in Europe and in Britain don't respect that referendum, don't respect that the British people voted in a very comfortable majority to exit, and they're angry at the Prime Minister of England, Theresa May, for saying, we are going to follow through with the will of the people. And I think that has
what they're angry about right now, it seems, is that there wasn't a plan afterwards.
And there still isn't.
There wasn't a plan, and the Wallonia
And there doesn't seem to be one yet right now.
Yeah, but what Brussels is doing is being punitive in saying, because you're exiting, we're not going to let you go easy, and we're going to be rather difficult every step of the way. I think they actually have, there's so many things that unite the United Kingdom with the rest of Europe. I wouldn't say that it's a foregone conclusion that this separation is forever. So why don't you make it a nice divorce? I would look at it, because on that basis, you're going to have much better possibility of having a reunification of Europe.
I'm getting really worried about this situation now because, look, sitting in Paris and watching it, we still don't know who Theresa May is, actually. Is she a sheep in wolf's clothing or is she a wolf in sheep's clothing? And that's not at all clear. She keeps on flip-flopping. You know, when she was at the party conference, it was hard Brexit. Now with the EU over at the summit, she's been much more open and kind of playing it down. And meanwhile, Meanwhile, investors are going to be taking decisions in the next few months, even before Britain invokes Article 50 next March.
She's coming across very Thatcherite, and I think she could be a wolf in wolf's clothing. Yes, and very tough. And I think a lot of people respect that.
Except the difference with Margaret Thatcher is that Thatcher is somebody who was in favor of free markets, against government. Theresa May is not at all sending that kind of message across, either at home or in Brussels.
No, and also the first thing that she did after she took over as Prime Minister was launch a reform bringing back grammar schools. And people thought, hello, what about the Brexit thing that you're supposed to be doing?
And just a quick word on this. Last week it was Marmite. Now we're seeing stories about the price of Kit Kat going up.
Oh, no. I didn't know about the Kit Kat, but clearly this is to do
Nestle,
with the
which
collapse
owns Kit Kat, saying that, that because we're starting to see inflation in Britain, is this all going to have an impact?
Of course it will. Of course it will. I mean, the Brits now coming on holiday here are having to pay a lot more money to get their euros.
I think it's temporary pain. We've seen countries outside the EU. Turkey wanted to be a member. They've had the highest growth rates if you consider them a member of Europe. So I think that they'll have relieved of the regulations. I think you will see some temporary pain that's going to last 3 to 5 years.
Turkey makes things. We don't. We import. We import our food, and I think that people just had not thought this through when they voted.
Well, I think it would be more concerning if Britain was a big exporter to the continent, and it isn't. It isn't a big manufacturer. No. You can get imports as a very competitive place in the world for imports. So I don't think you're going to have
But that still has to be negotiated.
All right, the resentment over Britain's border is also bilateral, by the way. Just days ahead of France's plan to permanently shut down the Jungle refugee camp in Calais, Britain has finally started letting in unaccompanied minors with ties to the UK at a rate of about a dozen a day. There are an estimated 800 underage migrants and refugees in the jungle, and aid groups fear they may fall prey to human traffickers. And Aaron Zaleski, we're seeing more and more tough talk on the part of the French ahead of that Monday 8 a.m. dismantling of the jungle, which has been announced by the Interior Ministry.
Right, we are. And there have been talk about this even immediately following the Brexit vote, that the French may dissolve the 2K Accord, which was enacted in 2003, that basically puts the UK border in France, in Calais, and they want it moved now to southern England. They're saying, no, we're done with this. Again, it's sort of like what's going on elsewhere with Britain and the EU. They don't want to be dealing with the migrant issue. They feel like Britain should be.
On that point, journalists around this table can empathize with what is every copy editor's nightmare, the Daily Mail, putting the remarks of the former Labour Home Secretary side by side with a picture of the 15-year-old daughter of Cindy Crawford.
Oh my God.
Their later edition, by the way, changed the photo, Ann Peckett.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
Oh, I saw that. That did make me laugh out loud, really. Yeah.
All right, one final point on all this, and I want to turn to Maeve McMahon, and there's less laughing about it, is the announcement that a trade deal that's been years in the works between the European Union and Canada is being held up now by one region in one country, Wallonia. And as this story breaks, it's yet more gloom for the EU. Is that treaty dead in the water? And if so, what does it say about the EU going forward?
No, François, I don't think it's dead in the water. I think what will happen, it will be postponed, and Justin Trudeau won't be packing his bags to come to Brussels next Thursday as planned. That meeting, in fact, that EU-Canada summit that was hailed to be historic, where they would sign off on that CETA deal, has actually been removed already from his calendar. But we saw Cecilia Malmström, that's the EU Trade Commissioner. She's been working, and of course her staff, day and night on this for years, and of course intensively over the past few days. They were locked in talks all morning with the Canadian Trade Minister and of course with the Wallonian members of the Wallonian Parliament, and she said she was saddened, but it's definitely not over. There will be some time perhaps given now to the Walloons to really comb through those documents and find and try and come to a compromise on more guarantees for them. But most people are saying it's just really a spanner in the works for the moment. And ironically, meanwhile, you've got a lot of people also celebrating because, of course, this represents a region of almost 4 million people. A lot of them were out on the streets here a couple of weeks ago. I spoke to them here. They were out with their placards. They have a big mobilisation that said stop CETA. And on that occasion, neither Jan-Claude Juncker nor Cecilia Malmström, Trade Commissioner, came down to actually listen or address their concerns. And many argued that that's what should have happened here. The Commission should have taken note and listened to all those concerns of Walloon last year or 2 years ago when they already addressed them, as opposed to just in the last few weeks when this came into the spotlight and into the eye of the media.
All right. Thanks for that, Maeve McMahon. I want to get the panel's just quick reaction to this. The trade deal with Canada in limbo, as you heard, not dead, but very much in limbo. The one with the United States right now is toast. Good or bad news?
Well, again, I think it's the second delicious irony of the night. We're seeing the EU has a mishmash of players and nation states, and even a small region can veto something like it's something as important as this. And the British,
which you might argue is democracy. That's what
yeah, but it's
opponents of the deal say.
Well, obviously, the British didn't think it was representative democracy to the point that that was fully accountable to them. And we're seeing a lack of accountability because all the EU nations will suffer because of the lack of this agreement. So maybe there's more evidence here that the British were right in what they did.
The nuance between majority rule and, in this case, rule by consensus.
You mean in terms of...
In the case of Juncker, the President of the European Commission, opening up the ratification of this to all the national and regional parliaments.
Well, they're going to have to do that with Brexit as well. And I imagine that if ever the accord with America goes through, but also that's on the skids, isn't it? That the same thing would happen there. I think the worrying thing is, I think this has been in negotiations for 7 years, hasn't it? The agreement with Canada, that after 7 years, it stumbles at the very, very last hurdle. And you think, well, good luck to Britain if they think that they're going to be the next Canada. I mean, apparently the Brexiteers think that they're actually the next America. Oh, we
so
can
7
be like
years
America.
of Brexit negotiations is what you're saying?
7 years of Brexit negotiations. It could be, couldn't it? Not the two.
Anne Penkett was talking about double speak from the British Prime Minister. What about the President of the Philippines? He was annoyed over U.S. criticism of his human rights records. Rodrigo Duterte sounding pretty definitive about severing ties with Washington. When he traveled for a state visit to China, he said he would forego an international ruling in his favor over disputed South China Sea fishing rights in favor of talks and pivoting away from the former colonial power, the United States.
America has lost me. And will I realign myself in your ideological flow, and maybe I will also go to Russia to talk to Putin and tell him that there are 3 of us against the world. Your Honors, in this venue, I announce my separation from the United States, both in military, not maybe social because the Philippines, both in military but economics also.
All right, that's what he said in Beijing. He's just landed back in his hometown of Davao City, and he's saying, no, I'm not severing economic ties. What I was really saying was separation of foreign policy. Will the real Rodrigo Duterte please stand up?
I think the first Duterte we saw was the real one. He's not a nice guy. He's out of control. Aaron used the term out of control narcissist, I think, earlier to reflect Donald Trump. This guy really is the real deal.
Is it a foretaste of what a Trump presidency?
Well, I think Donald would be much more careful on statements like that once he becomes president.
He's
Maybe
not
he
careful
now
on
he's.
any statements.
But I think this the Philippines is a very important ally of the United States. It's not going to move into the orbit of China very quickly, despite his interest in doing that. It's another sign, again, I think, of President Obama's lead from behind. We should have been working this guy more carefully. we should be condemning the extrajudicial killings of thousands of people in the
The
Philippines.
U.S. has, and the Obama administration
Not
has.
not loudly enough.
There was
that
that
should be
scrapped
followed up
meeting
with
at the ASEAN summit.
Yeah, that's actually what's led to the problem, because Duterte, like Trump, I mean, in a sense, he really is the Donald Trump of the Philippines.
Yes.
He's so incredibly thin-skinned that it was the American condemnation of his drugs crackdown that made him react and call Obama
Again, I
a
think
son
we're
of a
going
whore.
way too far. Donald Trump's not going to do thousands of extrajudicial killings. And I don't think he's going to announce one day that England's no longer an ally of the United States. So I think where this guy is, and I think Obama, the Wall Street Journal has a story that Duterte came up to Obama and asked to speak with him, and Obama shuffled him off to an aide, a low-level aide. Duterte was deeply insulted. He's obviously a narcissist. Obama needs to be much more engaged in world leadership. And I think some of the problems we're seeing around the world is his failure to engage. And we see this on the home front.
But about Duterte, what's going to happen now then? Which one?
Well,
do you think?
I think that luckily this seems to be Duterte himself. I mean, it's his personality. He obviously harbours a lot of rancor going back a long way regarding America, and his aides are horrified. The trade minister is horrified, and so I think now that he'll hopefully step back, and he must, because this is hugely important strategically in the South China Sea. There is a power struggle between China and America, and there it is true that Obama has been taking a back seat.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately. Caught up by the clock. I want to thank Anne Penkett, Aaron Zaleski, and Christopher Ruddy. Stay with us, though, because our Media Watch segment is next.
Trump and more Trump.
And we say hello to Diptyka Laurent. What have you brought for us here? Let's take a look. Donald Trump.
I was hoping
to
have a Trump-free day, but it just seems impossible these days. A lot of reactions from that charity dinner, of course. That was sort of meant to be a lighthearted roast, but ended up being quite overcooked, I guess, with animosity. Now, the Daily Beast, of course, looking at how Trump was booed over his comments about Hillary Clinton. The Daily Beast says it should have been a desperate breath from the trash swamp that America has been drowning in for the last year and a half. But Trump ended up getting booed over his below-the-belt barbs at Hillary Clinton, and some reactions on Twitter. This user says Melania looks like she'd rather be anywhere else but here. Of course, it was a pretty awkward night for everyone, I guess. While this user says he notes that Trump is actually not bowing his head, and he says, imagine what Trump's crowd would have said if that had been Obama not bowing his head. While another user says, Trump didn't really understand the concept of self-deprecation. Instead, he went with degradation and deserved every boo that he got.
All right. In the issue of the Al Smith dinner in the U.S. Creating tension, of course, much more serious tension where lives have been lost is between India and Pakistan over Kashmir.
That's right. And now Bollywood has gotten caught up in it. It seems to be this way for a lot of issues in India. Basically, the Pakistani Film Board has decided on a blanket ban of Indian films.
Which are very popular in
Which
Pakistan.
are very popular, of course. Bollywood films are very popular across the border. As a result, in turn, I guess, India has also banned Pakistani content. And now an award-winning Indian filmmaker's name is Karan Johar. He's been caught in the crossfire. Basically, he initially insisted he'd support Pakistani actors, and then he did a complete U-turn, and he said he would no longer hire any Pakistani actors in his future films. Now, it's caused a controversy because his new film comes out, coincides with the Hindu festival Diwali next week, and it features a Pakistani actor called Fawad Khan. So, of course, there are a lot of ultranationalists in India who are saying this film shouldn't be released in India, and there's even some groups that have threatened to vandalize cinemas that do show the film. So just looking at some reactions, basically on Facebook, this is his film, and on Facebook, a lot of the reactions accusing him of not being patriotic, of not supporting India, and in some cases of focusing on making money above all else.
Have we seen a tone like this before? I mean, there's been 4 wars, right, between India and Pakistan. Is this nothing new, or is this alarming?
Well, we've seen Bollywood get caught up in these kind of issues time and time again, but I think this one is particular because even the government has sort of chimed in. Johar met with the Indian Home Minister, I guess Interior Minister, yesterday on Thursday, and it appears that the government had initially supported the ban of the film, and now they're saying, okay, we're going to assure the safe release of the film. But, you know, the ludicrousness of the situation hasn't gone unnoticed. This user saying, in aspiring India, mobs and media goons decide, among other things, the fate of films and film producers, which I think is quite strong. And Johar has actually gotten some support from a writer in a Pakistani newspaper who says that he has succumbed to the pressure of the jingoistic, chest-thumping warriors in the wake of the release of the film. And he even says, even at the time of the Cold War, we didn't see this kind of animosity between two nations when it came to cinema.
All right, let's hope they can tone it down. I want to thank you for that, Deeptika Laurent. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for joining us here in The World This Week.